And now back to literature news.
Good afternoon, and thanks for tuning in to Literature News. Today, our main topic is the very well-known author, Edgar Allan Poe. Many people know Poe as a very creepy and unusual author because of his many disturbing stories. Although after learning facts about his life, you may be able to empathize with him and get a better understanding of how and where he got his inspiration for many of his unusual stories. Mainly his short story, The Fall of the House of Usher. Now Sherry will explain more on Poe. Over to you, Sherry.
Thanks, Kelly. Edgar Allan Poe was born on January 19th in the year of 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts. His parents were Eliza and David Poe. His mother, Eliza, was a well-known actress who was born in England, and his father, David Poe, was also an actor and a dancer. His parents were married in 1806. Edgar Allan Poe also had two siblings, one brother and one sister. His brother was William Henry Leonard Poe. He was born on January 30th, 1807. His sister's name was Rosalie. She was born in December of 1810. Shortly after Rosalie was born, their mother Eliza became very ill and died in 1811. David Poe, their father, had left around this time also because he could not handle the family life. He then died in Norfolk on December 11th in 1811. Poe was orphaned at the age of only 3. After the death of both parents, Poe and his siblings were separated. Edgar was adopted by John and Frances Allen. As Poe grew older, he and John became spiteful towards each other and later considered each other to be enemies. Poe went to many private schools growing up and was well known for quoting Shakespeare. William Burke, a writer at the time, encouraged Poe to take advantage of his gift for language and writing. While living with the Allens, Poe met a friend of the family. Her name was Jane Stannard. She could be considered one of Poe's first loves. Poe was said to have stated, "She was the first purely ideal love of my soul." Jane Stannard was married at the time she met Poe, but was in a depressing marriage. She became very depressed and eventually went insane. She later died in 1824. Poe was said to have visited her grave frequently in Shockoe Hill Cemetery. His poem, To Helen, is supposedly written about Jane Stannard. We also have reason to believe that she was a part of his inspiration for the woman in The Fall of the House of Usher. We believe this because she went mentally insane and later died. Now we will report back to you, Kelly, where a live reenactment of Poe's time with Jane will be shown. Over to you, Kelly.
Thanks, Sherry. As you can see, I am standing in the old house where the Allens and Edgar Allan Poe were said to have lived. As you see behind me, Poe seems to watch Jane in a way only a lover would. Where others saw her as crazy, he saw her as a goddess. You can almost imagine what he was thinking. Maybe he was wishing he could be with Jane, but she had gone so insane she could never be with him, and he would later have to see her pass away in 1824. When we return, Cher will be interviewing Dr. Howe. Stay tuned. Ranch dressing tastes good on everything.
May cause obesity, malnutrition, and diabetes. Hi there, and welcome back. I'm Sherry, and now we're going to have Dr. Howe answer a few medical questions for us. Welcome, Dr. Howe. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm also doing very well. I'm really pleased to have you on our show today.
Thanks, Kelly. It's nice to be here.
Dr. Howe, have there been any other cases like this where people are buried alive?
Yes, Kelly. In the 19th century, about 2% of people who were buried were found to be buried alive.
Oh my! How were people able to detect if they were buried alive?
Well, usually the graves were dug up by grave robbers, and people who would discover that the body was lying on the abdomen instead of the back. Other signs were many scratch marks on the inside of the coffins. Some were even found to have pulled all the hair out of their heads.
Oh my gosh! Dr. Howe, has anything been done to prevent these kind of premature burials?
Yes, some things were done. Many people created safety coffins. These coffins were equipped with a rope that was put in the deceased's hands and bled up to the surface, and was attached to a bell. That way, if people were suddenly awake, they could alarm the bell, and someone could rescue them. Other coffins were even more advanced than that. One coffin had a tube 3.5 inches in diameter, extending to a box on the surface. The tube was attached to a spring-loaded ball sitting on the corpse's chest. Any movement of the chest would release the spring, opening the box lid and emitting light and air into the coffin. A flag would then spring up on the surface and a bell would ring continually for half an hour. In addition to this, a lamp would light and stay lit for about half an hour in the case of movement happening at night. Some people even had food and toiletries installed in their coffins. Although many people went through the expense of making their coffins, there was never report a safety coffin being used successfully.
Wow, who knew? Do you think the fear of being buried alive would have an effect on Edgar Allan Poe's writing?
Yes, of course. What's that word?
Taphophobia. I've heard about that.
Taphophobia was a very common fear among people during Poe's lifetime, mainly because of various diseases such as cholera, smallpox, etc. Medical examiners were not quite sure how to tell if someone was actually dead, and many people were buried quickly because people feared the spread of the disease.
Oh, I see. Another important topic discussed in Poe's literature was inbreeding. Doctor, is it possible for people to develop insanity or other mental problems because of inbreeding?
Yes, Sherry, it is. It can cause insanity and many other health issues.
And do you think that Edgar Allan Poe wrote about a family of inbreeding in his story, The Fall of the House of Usher? Because he himself married his 13-year-old cousin when he was 27.
Well, I cannot speak for Poe, but I am aware that inbreeding was much more common in the 1800s than it is today.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Dr. Howe.
It was a pleasure.
So the question is, what do you think Edgar Allan Poe was thinking while he wrote The Fall of the House of Usher? Was he dreaming about his true love, Jane, or having nightmares about being buried alive? No one knows for sure, but we can only imagine. Well, that concludes our show. This is Sherry Jones signing off, and a good night.